All right, man, peace. So, brothers, this is going to be another entry into the series that I recently started entitled Black Degeneracy Hero Worship. And this edition is going to be featuring Mr. Antwon Rose, a young so-called black man who was gunned down by the police a couple of years ago. And the interesting thing about this story is that I was going to do a video about this when the media was first starting to push this narrative that he was the victim of police brutality, because the story was emerging that he was actually just another low-level nigga who received the benefits of that lifestyle, that being a bullet, either by one of the adversaries that you love to court out there in them streets or from the police. The fact of the matter is that our people are not going to elevate and rise until their mentality is elevated. And the mentality is not going to be elevated until the spiritual aspect is accepted. Our people have to accept what their real culture is, because then you'll start to apply the laws, statutes, and commandments to your life to the best of your ability. We're never going to be perfect. But then we will accept order. And once you accept order into your life, a lot of the confusion that plagues the so-called black community will go away, because number one, we will stop viewing ourselves as a color. Because you identify yourself by a color as opposed to a culture, you're never going to fit in to an organic understanding, a real understanding of what your life purpose is. A color is just a designation. That's all it is. So therefore, as a black person, you need white people to be relevant, because you cannot have white without black, and vice versa. Therefore, what you see on television, what we're told through the media, in the newspaper, on the internet, on social media, is going to have a heavy impact on us emotionally, because we refuse to accept what the foundational aspect is supposed to be, that being culture. We have the weakest culture on the planet Earth by far. That's why every 4 years we get talked into this notion that a politician is going to save us or destroy us. We're in a very low estate right now as a so-called nation of people. And that's because, to be quite frank with you, a lot of our people have to go. They've accepted the carnal aspect. They're not willing to give that up. Antwon Rose was one of those people. And beyond that, what the mainstream liberal media does, and they do this systematically, is to try to promote the low-level Negro as the victim. They want that person, whether that person be male or female, to be not just an example, but an ensample, meaning a forerunner of everything to come. They want that person to be a standard. Jacob Blake is not supposed to be a standard. George Floyd is not supposed to be a standard. Breonna Taylor, not supposed to be a standard. Breonna Taylor driving around rented vehicles with dead bodies in the trunk. Why is that? What was she involved in? George Floyd threatening to shoot pregnant women in the stomach. Jacob Blake deciding that he's going to have his children in the backseat of his vehicle. And instead of being concerned with their welfare, he's going to stop by a so-called girlfriend or ex-girlfriend's house to see whether or not she's quote-unquote cheating on him. I'm going to put you brothers onto something. If you've been with one of these modern westernized women long enough, she's probably going to have someone that at the very least she's talking to for some type of side entertainment, if not being intimate with, after a long enough period of time, and if they're young enough. You're supposed to have your mind focused on the Most High and the attainment of knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, because that's going to result in your life being a success. When your life is a success, the woman is going to respect you more because of what you bring to the table. And if she doesn't, you cut her off expeditiously. You're not supposed to be driving by some woman's house asking her if she's fucking somebody else. If you have to go through all that, she should have been cut off. That's how you know that's a low-level Negro. Jacob Blake is. And he received that recompense in the same way as Antwon Rose, who was a gang member. A gang member. But as I always state, we don't call those dudes coons and sellouts. We don't call the drug dealers coons and sellouts. So anyway, we're going to see what occurred here in regards to the narrative revolving around Mr. Antwon Rose, the young so-called black male who was gunned down by the cops, and how it relates to the Pittsburgh Steelers, one of the seminal franchises of the NFL. They've decided that they're going to dive headfirst into the woke river of deceit and attempt to act as if they're going to be some type of initiator into societal change, and they're not. None of these football teams or basketball teams are going to change society at all. Unfortunately, so many so-called black males today, they think like women. They think emotions first. So therefore, it makes it far easier for them to be manipulated. And 2020 is the year of the massive mind fuck. People all over the world have been getting massively mind fucked since January with the Kobe Bryant stuff. And then, of course, with the coronavirus and the George Floyd and the Breonna Taylor and now this so-called election. It's just been one massive socially engineered mind fuck. And who knows if people are ever really going to recover, especially since the vast majority of them are two-dimensional. But just getting back to the point, these sports teams and these athletes are not going to have anything to do with any societal change of note or substance because they're not smart enough. It's no disrespect. They're not smart enough. This notion that everyone should be able to speak on everything is a sign of the decline of society. Because you used to have credentials and show that you have some type of cognitive function to be viewed as someone who deserved to have the right to speak on a topic. You wouldn't go to have your car fixed by someone who just talked about cars. You'd have to know that they were a licensed mechanic, right? Why should I have to listen to a Renee Montgomery or a LeBron James or one of the members of the Pittsburgh Steelers tell me about how race relations should be? I don't give a fuck about how you feel about much of anything outside of your sport. But the Pittsburgh Steelers got themselves caught up in a lot of nonsense because they did not do their due diligence in finding out exactly what the parameters of the storyline were regarding Mr. Antwon Rose. They thought that he was just another quote-unquote innocent black man who was gunned down by the cops for no reason. And nothing could be further from the truth. So anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
Man, Monday Night Football had a lot of action on the field, and there was some drama off the field. An interesting storyline popped up during the Pittsburgh Steelers-New York Giants game. Before the game, the Steelers had issued a statement saying that every player and coach, they were united as a team, that they were going to honor the memory of a 17-year-old named Antwon Rose Jr. who was shot and killed by a police officer in 2018. The team had decided that they were going to honor his memory by wearing his name on the back of all of the helmets and on all of the hats. So the players would have it on their helmets and coaches and other staff would have his name on their hats.
Once again, I told you, brothers, 3-4 years ago that the entire intention of the Colin Kaepernick narrative was to bring cultural Marxism into the NFL. And thereafter, the NFL and the NBA were going to be used as hubs of cultural Marxism to socially engineer society. I told you guys this 3 or 4 years ago. The Kaepernick thing failed, so what they did was they ritualistically removed George Floyd in front of a national audience. It was a national sacrifice so that they could force people to accept their doctrine pertaining to this concept of racial equality or unity per se.
And they were going to do this tribute to him throughout the entire NFL season. But when the players took the field on Monday night, there was one player on the Pittsburgh Steelers who didn't have Antwon's name on his helmet, Al Villanueva. Now, of course, Al Villanueva is not only a famous offensive lineman for the Steelers, but he's also a decorated military serviceman.
Villanueva was the same person, the same player who refused to adhere to the Pittsburgh Steelers' attempts to co-sign with Colin Kaepernick and protest during the national anthem. So we already know where he stands. He's not going to follow woke niggas blindly just because he happens to represent the 10% of white dudes on the team or the 10% of non-black men on the team. The real issue within the so-called black community is terrible leadership. We have terrible leadership in the so-called black community because the so-called black man has been trained and raised to be a cartoon character. And I'm not speaking about all so-called black men. There are a lot of wonderfully intelligent and erudite brothers out there. But a lot of these cats are like cartoon characters. They're like cutout figures, cardboard figures. They're just flat. They have no depth of understanding because they just respond emotionally to everything because the patrilineal descent and therefore the passing of wisdom has been cut off. They're being raised in these toxic black feminine households where everything is an obsession, an over-obsession with social media and the television and reality TV shows, to the point where they either become effeminized because they're always at home, or they're seeking after the male energy by running outside and they join a gang or a clique or, who knows, sometimes a drug cartel. just because they're so desperate to fit in with other men and receive that male energy that they're not getting in the home. They're not getting any wisdom from an elder, so now they have to find some type of information from a quote-unquote OG, which is normally a dumb nigga who made so many mistakes that now he could tell a younger person what not to do, but he can never teach what to do.
Army Ranger who did 3 tours of duty in Afghanistan, and his story is pretty well known. And when he took the field, there was a different name on the back of his helmet, a name, Alwyn Cash. And at first, people were like, wait a second, why is Al Villanueva kind of breaking ranks with the team and doing his own thing when everybody else has decided to honor this other person?
Maybe because Al Villanueva has his own mind. Why does Al Villanueva have to do what everyone else on the team is doing? This notion that they all agree. Who agreed? Was it a unanimous agreement that they were going to support this person, Antwon Rose? Or was it a majority rule? And who was the captain of this? Like, it's like, dude, because you can pancake block a 300-pound defensive lineman, or because you had 8 interceptions last year, I'm supposed to let you tell me about race relations because your football exploits made you the captain of the team. So now all of a sudden you're going to tell me about what to think about race? Like, this whole thing is a big fucking joke.
And then we started doing some digging, and it turns out that Alwyn Cash was an Army Sergeant First Class who was killed by an improvised explosive device while serving in Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2005. That is according to the Military Times. He was 35 years old. At the time of his death, he was married with a 12-year-old daughter, and he was posthumously awarded the Silver Star, which is awarded for valor in combat. So Al Villanueva, being a military man himself, decided to do his own tribute and break.
And that's a wonderful thing, what Al Villanueva did, because I never would have heard of Alwyn Cash had it not been for Al Villanueva. I would much rather hear the story of an Alwyn Cash, a person who showed great valor in a traumatic situation, than someone like an Antwon Rose, who was the bane of his community, someone who was a toxin that needed to be removed. That's all Antwon Rose was.
From the team, and in case you're wondering, which I think this is actually an important fact too, the 17-year-old that the rest of the team was honoring was a black kid who was 17 years old, and the person that Al Villanueva is honoring is also a black man. So the question that a lot of people are asking is, did he kind of blindside the team and do this on his own, or did he go to the coach and the team and kind of clear it by everybody? That's what Mike.
Right, but why would that matter though? I'm sure people are going to say, because we're a team. Right, we're a team on the football field, dude. We're not a team in all walks of life. I mean, what the fuck is next? We all have to vote for Joe Biden? The fuck out of here.
Tomlin, the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, was asked, and this is what Tomlin had to say.
He discussed that with you, and can you share with me the thought process as to why he did it?
Yes, he did discuss that with me, and it's in line with everything that we said about participating in elements of social justice this offseason. As an organization, and myself as a head coach of the organization, we're going to support our players in however they choose to participate and express themselves, or to not participate or not express themselves.
In other words, Coach Mike T, a.k.a. Herman Boone, is letting it be known. We have some sassy, frassy, super sensitive niggas on this team, and basically, you know, we're going to rub their backs and allow them to get involved in the quote-unquote social justice agenda because that's the newest hot thing. That's the newest hot topic on the streets for these woke niggas to act like they're involved in, just so that they don't get all caught up in a tizzy. But I know for a fact that this is some bullshit. This Antwon Rose kid, and you know Mike T, no, he's someone who's thorough, so he probably did his due diligence on who Antwon Rose is, and you know, so this is some bullshit, but he didn't want to make waves his damn self. So when Villanueva came into his office and said, look, I'm not going to roll that way, I'm going to roll this way, Mike T probably said, do what you need to do, bro. Just make sure that you block for the quarterback.
As long as they do so thoughtfully and with class.
So that said, you know, and I understand why Al Villanueva would want to honor the person that he honored, but if the whole rest of the team had already decided and put out a statement saying they were unified in honoring this other person, I mean, what is the take on Al kind of breaking ranks with the team and doing his...
The take is that it's very obvious to me that the Pittsburgh Steelers have very idiotic leadership within the locker room when it comes to situations outside of football. That's what's very clear to me. That's number one. Number two, it's also very clear that if there was some type of quote-unquote agreement, it was not unanimous. It was just majority-driven, and it's probably just more woke niggas in the locker room who think that they could tell everybody else what to think and what to do.
His own thing.
Yeah, so for me, the first thought would be, is he going to honor it all season? You can't really, I think the thing about social activism is you really can't tell people how to do it. Like, and I said that even when I opted out. You can't tell people what the best way to be an activist is, in a sense of that people are going to do what's close to them. Now, having said that, I think that the team is always number one. I'm one of those players that
Yes, the team is number one when it comes to what you're doing on the field or on the court, yes.
Believe in team and how you move as a team. And even in 2016, when we wore shirts, we got it cleared by everybody on the team. Like, our captains asked everyone on the team, are you okay with wearing this shirt? Do you want to wear this shirt? Okay, once they had a yes from everyone, then we all did it. So understanding that the team, the WNBA did it this year when they did the Say Her Name campaign, and every week they honored somebody from the Say Her Name campaign. I believe in the power of numbers. So
Yes, because you're carnal. So you believe in the power of numbers. You believe that just because you have numbers, that makes you correct. It's normally the opposite. That's why I always state the bigger the crowd, the dumber the crowd. If you want to figure out what people are doing wrong, just pay attention to what's the most popular.
If the team was only going to do this one, I don't know if they're going to do it all season or not, but I always stick with the team because there's powers in number, and you can find different ways, like a wristband, you can honor.
There's power in truth. Yes, there is power in numbers. There's no doubt about that, because with the numbers comes the ability to force your views on others. That's the mob mentality that's normally associated with Marxism. And that's the main reason why they want to take away people's rights to gun ownership, etc. They want to empower the mob. That's why they're attacking the quote-unquote Caucasian conservatives from Middle America. Because they know that for the most part, that's the main force standing in between, the overall takeover of America, the conversion of the American paradigm towards Marxism. You have these Caucasians in Middle America who are not having it, so they have to be demonized. They know for the most part, the so-called black man is, he's too caught up living in between the ass cheeks of the most powerful female in his family, whether it be his wife or his mother. He's too caught up in between those ass cheeks to really think in a very powerful or cogent way, and to be a threat in that way. They're more concerned with the Caucasians from Middle America because they know the Caucasians from the coast are mostly liberal, aka cuckolds.
Whoever you want as well on a wristband or something different. Have your cleats made to honor whoever you want to make. Like, you can do different things, but
yes, a whole bunch of silly gestures. I'm going to put the face of someone who got gunned down by the cops on my cleats. That's going to do a lot for their memory.
If everyone was doing the helmet, I would have stuck with the helmet.
Yeah, I think that we don't really know the relationship that Al had with this soldier. Maybe
he does not need to have had a relationship. All he needs to have done, or all he needs to do, is to be sincere about why he put the name on the back of his helmet. And to be honest with you, he does not even need to be sincere. He just needs to do whatever the fuck he feels like doing, because he's there to play football.
There was some connection there that we are not aware of. I think if you're him, I think if you're out, you do want to be careful in that you want to make sure that people know that this is not, that you don't support what happened with Antwon. This is just supporting another cause.
It's not about supporting or not supporting. I have bad news for you. When you get caught up in the gang life or in the drug life, you're probably going to get gunned down or placed into the penitentiary. And you can get gunned down by the cops. You could get gunned down by your adversaries. Shit happens.
I think that's important because you don't want to go against your teammates, and these are touchy subjects. So I think it's important for him to make it clear. Look, nothing against what happened with Antwon in his situation, but I have something else that maybe is that.
Life is filled with so much stress. One would think that you should be able to go into your workplace and just do your fucking job, without having to be concerned about people's political opinions. I always stated when I worked in corporate America that there were 4 or 5 topics that I would never ever address within the corporate America workspace. That being religion, politics, feminism, race, and sexuality. I stay away from those topics because the vast majority of people barely understand what's going on in their own lives, much less the truth about topics like that. Like, most so-called black people don't want to hear that if you want to have political power, you literally have to raise children from their birth to be imbued with the understanding that they have to serve their community, number one, and number two, these are the agendas that we want you to enact. That's why politicians are called public servants. So-called black people have it backwards. They think that, they're supposed to be a part of the fan club of a politician that pops up out of nowhere. By the time a politician pops up out of nowhere on national TV, they've already been prepped and trained. They're actors. Most people don't want to hear about race not being a color. Most people don't want to hear that religion, for the most part, is just a continuance of the worship of the Babylonian Kemetic mystery school system. Unless you have the proper understanding of the Bible. Most people don't want to be told that sexuality is not something that is DNA based necessarily. When I say necessarily, I mean some people are born with that demon from their birth. When people say that they're born gay, they're talking about being born with a demon from their birth, because there's been no study that has proven that sexuality has any link to DNA or your chromosomes or what have you, or genetic structure. There's been none. And that's why homosexuality, lesbianism, has always been viewed, or at least was always viewed before the 1970s, as a psychological disorder. People don't want to hear those things, so why discuss them in the workplace? So I could imagine being an NFL player and having some meathead fucking idiot trying to tell me what I should be doing about this political conversation. It's like, dude, just make sure that you run the fucking play. Block your man, run your route, tackle the guy. That's your job. I don't want to hear your bullshit.
Touches me in a different way. So I understand what he did. Look, I would never tell him what to do. That man put his life on the line. And I get what you're saying, Renee, about, hey, that's his team. But, he was part of a different team, and that is the United States military. And, the football players are playing a game. He went out there and he risked his life. So I would never tell him, what I thought he should honor, because he's done things that I'm not brave enough to do.
I think that Mike Tomlin handled this brilliantly, actually, in basically saying, well, first off, the fact that Al went to Mike Tomlin beforehand and cleared it and essentially got Mike Tomlin's blessing was great. I think what Mike Tomlin said on Tuesday was excellent about how they support Al, because you don't want to do is get into a public spat with a guy who, served as in the Army Special Forces. I mean, come on.
And I think it's not about that as well. Everyone, I'm sure, respects that he served in the forces. That's a specific thing that they're doing, like the name on the back of the helmet. So there's so many more ways. Honestly, I didn't even see that. If we're talking Monday Night Football as a viewer, I didn't see it until it was brought to my attention.
I think that Babcock had a good point where I don't see it as disrespectful for Antwon. I see it as just a different way to honor somebody else. And, look, we're trying to figure out if Al's planning on making this tribute for the entire season too. And once we get more information, we'll have.
Right, but why are you worried about that? If he decides to have different names every week, that's his business. If he decides to have that one name every week, that's his business. The problem with people is that they're so fucking idle-minded. They're always so concerned about what everyone else is thinking and why. That's how you know that there's something going on in their home life where there's a component there that's missing, because people who are content and happy in their home life normally are too busy to be concerned about what the next motherfucker's doing. Like, why are you so concerned about what this next person is thinking or what they're doing? As long as they're keeping the laws of the land and the laws of the Most High, more importantly, why are you so concerned? If that motherfucker want to have Ronald McDonald's name on the back of his helmet, that's his business. Okay, so brothers, we've jumped ahead in this entire Pittsburgh Steelers Antwon Rose storyline. Once again, this is simply about the exaltation of the low-level Negro. They want all so-called black people to look at a lot of these fuck-ups in our communities as sympathetic figures, and they're not. Most of these people are just the recipients of divine judgments and a divine retribution for how much chaos they've caused for our people. As I always state, a lot of these niggas gotta go.
Welcome back to the show. More drama with the Pittsburgh Steelers, who I think were trying to do a good thing and show unity by trying to honor a person that they said was the victim of police violence, a person named Antwon Rose Jr., who was 17 years old.
No, Antwon Rose Jr. was the victim of police protection. That cop, he did a great service, because who knows how many people Antwon Rose may have killed had he lived longer. Other people might say, well, you never know. The brother could have repented. He might have become a great person. Let me say this. We'll never know either way. All we can go by is what he did, not what he could have become. When the Most High decides that it's time for you to receive your judgment based on the thing that you've done, I can't bat an eyelash at it. And I think that it's very important that we start to look towards higher level beings as standards of propriety, as opposed to what we normally do, which is lionize low-level niggas. And once again, the liberal media, the mainstream liberal media, they have a hand in this, because they're always trying to exalt low-level thinking so-called blacks. Why is that? Because they're the ones who are more likely to vote Democrat. They don't care about the so-called black father who might be driving home from work in his car and gets pulled over by a Klan member who happens to be a member of the police force, and who comes up with this excuse to kill and shoot him because he's driving a nice vehicle. They don't focus on those things. They focus more on the degenerates. Jacob Blake was a degenerate, or is a degenerate. Antwon Rose, George Floyd were degenerates. In the video that I did on Ahmaud Arbery, no disrespect to him, he clearly was mentally disturbed. I'm not quite sure if he was a degenerate or not, but he has some of those tendencies, that's for damn sure. And as I already stated, Breonna Taylor, I mean, no disrespect. You lay down with dogs, you get up with fleas. We know for a fact many of these modern day liberal black females, they love engaging in relations with degenerate males. So many of them, are victims in crossfire. We have to start focusing on productive so-called black people and the issues that they have, so that we can set new standards. And we have to force the mainstream liberal media to capitulate to those new standards.
He was shot and killed by police in 2018, and the team.
This is a very nice photo, but I wonder what the latest photos of Mr. Antwon Rose showed. They love to show photos like this as if, he was an innocent person. No disrespect to the brother, but he was involved in a drive-by shooting. He knew what type of life he was living. And there may be certain people out there who may believe that I'm being too hard on him. But once again, he was out there trying to take people's lives.
As a tribute to him, agreed that all the players would have his name on the back of their helmets, and coaches and other people on the sideline would have his name on their hats. They seemed to be united in that. And then, as we reported, Alejandro Villanueva, the offensive lineman for the Steelers, did not take the field with Antwon's name on his helmet. Instead, he decided to honor somebody else, a Sergeant Alwyn Cash, who was killed in the line of duty serving, in Iraq. He is a military guy. He was awarded the Silver Star, and Villanueva felt it would be more important for him to honor Cash instead of Rose. Well, now another Steelers player is speaking out and saying, implying that there is serious regret about wearing Antwon Rose's name on his helmet, and that player is Marquise Pouncey. Marquise Pouncey said, quote, "I want to personally clarify what transpired this past Monday in regard to having Antwon Rose's name on the back of my helmet. I was given limited information on the situation regarding..."
No, sir. What happened is that you neglected to do your due diligence and your proper research in finding out exactly what it was you were becoming confederate with when you decided to wear that person's name on the back of your helmet. It's always the responsibility of the individual to fully understand what it is that they're being subjected to when they receive information, because it could be disinformation or misinformation. In this case, it was disinformation, because believe me, they willfully omitted certain info about the Antwon Rose case to get certain of the more pivotal members of the Pittsburgh Steelers to go along with the storyline. That's why I side with Al Villanueva, because he was astute enough, most likely, to say to himself, let me look this person up and find out exactly what this was about. A lot of these woke niggas, they don't look anything up. I say this all the time. Wokeism is just an offshoot of liberalism. Liberalism is another name for Marxism. Marxism is another term for Luciferianism. That's why, once again, they're trying to push and promote any type of decrepit conduct amongst our people. Because do what thou wilt, of course, is the credo of Crowleyism, and Crowleyism is just Luciferianism. It's very important that you push that energy of doing whatever you feel like doing at the moment. So that's why you have these people. They're gang members, they're drug dealers, they're drug users. But you know what? I could lead this movement. I could lead the quote-unquote Black Lives Matter movement. Even though I do whatever the fuck I feel like doing, I don't research anything, and I have no end game, I have no plan. My attitude is always going to be defund the police and tear down this system, and the whole system has to be overturned. Who the fuck are you to say anything about a system? Can you replace it with something that functions properly? Me as a so-called black man, I would not trust the average two-dimensional thinking so-called black person to think up a system that's going to be functional, because most two-dimensional thinking black people have households that are dysfunctional. So how the hell could you create a functional system for an entire society? Why would anyone want to be equal to you when they don't respect how you move? Once the people respect how you move, then they'll listen to you. That's how it goes. At the end of the day, no man should want to be equal anyway. You're supposed to be wanting to rule. Your goal should always be, I want to rule, not be equal.
And I was unaware of the whole story surrounding.
And rulership, of course, starts with ruling over yourself and over your family.
And what transpired during the trial following the tragedy.
In a benevolent, beneficial way, of course.
Should have done more research to fully understand what occurred in its entirety. I will make my own decision about what to wear on the back of my helmet. Make no mistake, I am against racism, and I believe the best thing I can do is to continue helping repair relationships between the police and their communities. And then he said, systemic racism issues have occurred in our country for far too long, and that needs to stop. So, Babcock, what is he specifically referring to here?
So, Antwon Rose, like you said, Evan, was shot and killed by police. The issue here is that before Antwon was shot and killed by the police, he was allegedly involved in a drive-by shooting, and the victim of that shooting, the man who was shot, says that Antwon is the one who shot him. And the police then were looking for Antwon in the car that he was in. They located the car, and while they were trying to conduct the stop, and while they were actually putting the driver and taking him into custody, Antwon allegedly fled the car, and that's when the police officer shot Antwon, and unfortunately he passed away as a result of the injuries. Now, the officer who shot him was actually charged with first-degree murder, third-degree murder, and some other charges. He went to trial and was found not guilty.
Of course he was found not guilty. That's why they gave him those charges, because they knew they would not be able to prove those charges on a police officer. And if I stated before that Antwon Rose killed someone, of course I meant to say that he just shot at someone. He was involved in a drive-by shooting. But of course the intention was to kill someone. At the end of the day, they never had any intention of incarcerating that police officer.
Now, I should also say that in the car, the officials found a gun near where Antwon was sitting, and they also allegedly found gunshot residue on his hand. So by all available evidence, it seems that, like, before Antwon was shot, he had just taken part in a drive-by shooting.
Renee, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so there's a lot of thoughts. If you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, obviously you have to do your due diligence. As a player that's getting ready for camp and getting ready for the season, that's not necessarily something that the players are going to do. Now, having said that,
That's why they should not be involved in any leadership positions involving societal issues, particularly on the field. Because what happens is that once you concern yourself with societal issues off the field, that will cause you to do greater due diligence. When it's on the field, it's a part of the show. So their attitude is, we're just going to go along with the show.
The case is drawing the Pittsburgh Steelers and the players, and I've seen even online, people are still even torn, having all the facts that Babcock said, people are still torn. So my thing would be, if there is smoke where there's fire, as we're saying, allegedly, it looks like it.
The reason why people are torn is because, once again, within the so-called black community, especially on Instagram and Twitter and other social media platforms, they adore and worship criminals and low-level so-called blacks.
true. That's the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like that falls directly on the Steelers. If you're going to have a whole team thing where you want the team to be involved in something, I think that you need to do your due diligence, if it's true.
There is video of the police shooting, and it's compelling to watch because
Compelling to watch? You mean you got turned on, huh?
Rose was running, and the cop opens fire. And if you're just watching that piece of video, it's bad. You can't help but feel horrible for the kid and his family. And you understand why you want to call this stuff out. But I think what Marquise is saying is you can be against police violence, but also you don't have to honor somebody who may have been mixed up in a violent act himself. Now, I'm not trying to convict Rose here. I wasn't there, and we're just hearing two sides of the story. But while this is such a controversial story, I think Marquise's point is that, to Renee's point, everybody needs to do all the due diligence and explain everything to everybody so that everybody can make a decision for themselves. This is really tough. I mean, this is,
yeah,
in my opinion,
it's a
really tough.
No, not really. Not particularly tough at all, honestly. It's just about leaving people the fuck alone and letting them figure out what they want to do when it comes to issues that don't involve football. In the locker room and on the field, your job is to play football. You have to remember the plays. You have to remember your assignments. It's not your job to be confederate with other people's political beliefs on the football field.
For the players, it's tough because as players, and even just the trend amongst pro leagues is that you want to back a victim of police brutality, and it's to shed light on what's going on. But if you have,
you know what, let's shed some light on the amount of black fetuses that are going to be murdered this year, Renee Montgomery, this year and next year, and watch how quick the quote-unquote conversation changes. Liberal black females love to have conversations about shit that doesn't involve them. If you take the amount of unarmed so-called black men who were shot in the back by racist police officers and killed, and you multiply that by the amount of so-called armed black men who were shot by the police and killed, and multiply that by the amount of so-called black men who were killed by other so-called black men, what they call quote-unquote black on black crime, you still wouldn't have the amount of black fetuses that will be killed this year and next year by the liberal black woman. That is the number one bane of the so-called black community, is the liberal black woman.
this step, it almost hurts the cause a lot, because then people are like, see, this is the people that you're protecting from police brutality. So that's why I said you have to make sure, especially as the organization of the Pittsburgh Steelers as a whole, like you knew the whole team was going to do this. A player even came to you, to the coach, and said, I'm going to do one for, I forget the military man's name, but that you have to have done your due diligence. I don't understand that.
What's happened now is this has kind of evolved into a PR disaster for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah.
And you got to wonder if they could have this one back, would they do it differently? And I think
the Pittsburgh Steelers organization should not view this as a PR disaster. They should just be thankful to Al Villanueva for causing them to elevate their level of understanding and patience when evaluating societal issues. Whenever something bad happens, don't look at it as a setback. Look at it as a calling to raise your game, step your game up.
At this point, it's probably yes.
But anyway, that's basically it on that. We'll see where this storyline goes. When I say this storyline, I'm talking about the NFL getting involved in the culturally Marxist aspect of trying to force people into this globalist mind of viewing everyone as quote-unquote equals, which is never going to happen. But anyway, peace.